All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. For everybody that does not know me, my name is Tim Shum. I am the founder and president of Lucas James Talent Partners. I want to thank everyone for coming. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And perfect. Thanks again so much for everybody who came today. I know everybody's busy. There's been a lot of stuff that's been going on in 2020 affecting everybody around the economy, different kind of companies, different industries affected one way or another. I think if you're attending this informational section around RPO, recruitment process outsourcing, you're either an HR people, talent leader, recruiter, generalist, definitely been affected by this situation in one way or another. You're probably a service provider, I would imagine, looking for different strategies, different ways to provide value to your customers in a recessionary environment versus the bull market run that we had from 2011 to 2020. So nonetheless, I really appreciate everyone showing up today. Again, my name is Tim Shum. I'm the founder and president of Lucas James Talent Partners. We're an on-demand RPO firm based out of Chicago. We have customers within the state of Illinois, outside of the state of Illinois, all across the United States, performing recruiting process outsourcing services. So a lot of people do not know what the term RPO is, haven't heard of recruitment process outsourcing before. They've heard of recruiters. They've heard of working with contingent fee-based recruiters before, staffing companies. Recruiting process outsourcing is relatively new, just in the past 15 years as a disruptive model to the alternative, which we're going to get into today. So we're going to go over a little agenda. We're going to go over an overview of 2020 and then the subsequent impact on the economy and then the subsequent impact on talent and HR leaders and what the go forward playbook is going to be. We'll talk about these playbooks. We'll do a short summary on the boom time playbooks, what talent leaders day-to-day strategies, initiatives look like from 2011 to 2020, when there was low unemployment, when things were good, to now what the recessionary playbook is. So we'll look at past recessionary playbooks of 08, 09, 2000, 2001, 2002, so on and so forth, and look at different strategies that companies are taking in 2020 to react to this pandemic and the subsequent downturn. We'll do an introduction, of course, to RPO, or recruitment process outsourcing, and look at the alternative recruitment models that are out there and make comparisons to one another. And then, of course, the benefits of what an RPO partner can do in a recessionary environment that I believe will be in for the foreseeable future, fortunately or unfortunately. And then one with Q&A. I want to make this session as interactive as possible. So for the attendees, if you look bottom center left of your screen, this is Zoom webinar. Hit the Q&A button. You can type your question in there. I received some questions via email prior to this that I'll make sure that I get to, but if you have additional questions, I want to make sure that I get to those as well. So just rehashing 2020, I think it's necessary to take a step back and look at what the past decade has been like. So coming out of the 08, 09 recession, which was brutal in its own right, affected the financial industry, which subsequently affected most industries that are out there. Coming out of that, we've really seen an unprecedented long-term bull run in the economy. Things are good. Companies are growing. There's a war for talent out there. There's very, very, very little unemployment. If you want a job, there's plenty of opportunities out there. In fact, for most skill sets, there's probably more jobs than there are people to fulfill those jobs, which created the war for talent. There's predictability. Hey, we've been growing year over year over year over year. Why wouldn't we grow again this year or next year? And then I can plan for that. And my playbooks associated with this as a CEO, a CFO, or an HR talent leader are based on that predictability that we've had a luxury of having over the past decade. We had record low unemployment, somewhere in the neighborhood of mid 3% unemployment. It's the lowest that it's been in recorded history, especially in the United States and our economy. And then very, very, very quickly overnight, going from record low unemployment in, let's call it February 2020, to record high unemployment since the Great Depression of somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 14%, depending on the month. We went from essentially 7 million Americans on unemployment benefits, out of work, looking for their next opportunity, overnight in the span of 6 weeks to 30 million Americans out of work on unemployment benefits. Very unprecedented, very, very, very quick. It escalated quickly. And then overnight, the playbooks associated with boom times to bear times happened very, very quickly. Just to put it in perspective, if you take the 23 million Americans net that were once working that are now not working, and you think about the salaries that those people had, and then the spending that they had before all this that they're not going to be able to have. This, in my opinion, is going to have longer effects on the general economy, regardless of if a vaccine happens, the trickle-down effect. I think people's confidence in their spending psyche has changed, at least in the short term, and that's going to trickle more into the economy. So if you take 23 million Americans, average salary of $40,000 a year, which is generous. Statistically, it's about $50,000 a year on average for U.S. workers. You're looking at $1 trillion annually that went into the pockets of these workers, say in 2018, 2019. That's not going to be there in 2020. That's going to be $1 trillion that isn't going to go to groceries, isn't going to go to restaurants, isn't going to go to luxury items, isn't going to go to these companies that are getting this revenue, that are getting this cash, that are then going to go buy software with this, go buy other services, invest in future growth. So I think once that trickle effect happens, you're going to be looking at a recessionary environment very similar to 0809 that maybe is going to last maybe another year, 2, 3, or 4 years. So we need to plan for that as business leaders, and you better bet that CEOs and CFOs are planning for this. You throw in some stimulus that's supporting the economy in the short term. But essentially, the point I'm trying to make is there was a very, very strong period of high certainty and then a very, very rapid transition to a period of high uncertainty that we're now in. So what's the impact on HR and talent leaders? So now you're looking at massive furloughs and reduction in forces. You see that at small companies, medium-sized companies, large companies. HR leaders are, I would say, have the toughest job out there of everybody. If you really put yourself in the shoes of an HR people, talent leader, they're the ones being affected by these furloughs. They're in the room to discuss who's staying on board and who's not, and they have to communicate the message with the team. Highly stressful environment. You throw on diversity and equity and inclusion strategies that are now at the forefront, and rightfully so, based on social injustice and the subsequent Black Lives Matter movement. Companies now have the responsibility to make sure that they're making an impact in this area. That's on the HR leader. Business continuity planning. Everyone's now working from home. We need to make sure our workers are safe. That's on the HR leader. Workforce planning. You better believe a CFO is running 9, 10, 15 different models to say, we need to be prepared for what happens here. That HR leader is tied to every single one of those plans as it relates to staffing. We either need to hire people, we might need to furlough people, we need to bring back furloughed employees, and everywhere in between. That's on the HR leader. Return to office is now happening. CARES Act. There's a lot of things that are on the HR leader's plate that weren't on their plate prior to all this. Now, if you look at a company that has done a layoff, maybe a 1,000-person company had to lay off 10% of their workforce. A smaller company, a larger company, doesn't matter. Whatever the percentage is, you have to believe that a portion of those layoffs, the HR team members were affected by that. We were doing recruiting before. We had X amount of recruiters. If we're doing a layoff, the recruiting team is going to be affected. We had 10, 12, 15, 20 HR generalists and managers. We need to cut that staff down a little bit. That's an overhead position when we're going through these moves. So now you're talking about an HR leader having lack of resources and bandwidth that they were used to before, and without a lack of a playbook. So every strategy that was utilized in the past, now you have to put into context of the new normal that we're in, the associated strategies. So we'll very quickly go through some of the aspects, if you're a talent leader, what these last 8-9 years bull market strategies were. Put it in perspective, it was a war for talent. If we're going to grow, we need the right people on the bus. I'm willing to pay for that. I'm willing to invest internally for that. There was a spotlight put on the HR and talent organization, and rightfully so. It was a war for talent out there, and you can't grow without the right people or the right training and development. There was high certainty, there was growth, there was predictability, there was investment, there was risk-taking. There was a strong investment in internal HR and talent infrastructure versus, say, outsourcing. We want to focus on the candidate experience. We want to do this in-house and create a culture around this, and rightfully so. So you saw that a lot with companies large and small. Other ancillary initiatives that you saw that had significant investment, talent branding, internal learning and development for retention and upskilling of employees, in-house recruitment resources, of course, technology, luxury employment and benefits to try to attract that talent. There was a ton of investment and focus centered in the HR people realm during this time. And of course, pay for talent if necessary. Use a fee-based 20, 25, 30% firm if you have to, even though it's expensive, meaning, hey, I need a $100,000 person. I'm willing to spend $25,000 on that one person. The cost benefit analysis to most companies during the boom times is I'm willing to pay that fee because if I don't get this person, then I can't grow, right? And that was the mentality, and that was part of the playbook. And then, of course, just part of the times was the 3% unemployment limited the amount of contract workers that were out there, a limited amount of the opportunities or placements for temp to permanent type opportunities, which gave companies a lot of flexibility. Why? Because it was a war for talent. There was too many well-paying permanent jobs out there. So you just didn't see it outside of maybe a manufacturing facility, a warehouse facility, or a call center where temp to perm makes a lot of sense. Now let's turn to the bear market playbooks for talent leaders. First, you want to put yourself in the shoes of a CEO or a CFO during this time, before we get to the HR and the talent leaders. So if I'm a CEO and a CEO during the boom times, how do I create more value? How do I invest for future growth? How do I beat my competition and get more market share? That quickly changed to, how do I stay alive through all this? How do I stay alive? How do I stick around? How do I maintain in order to get through this situation so I can potentially thrive on the other side of this? And some CEOs are in worse spots than others, but you think about cost containment being a very, very high level important initiative. You think about return on investment. Any dollar that I do spend, I'm going to scrutinize as much as possible to make sure I'm getting the most bang for my buck. I have to get value out of any vendor or product purchase that I have. And then most importantly, cost variability and flexibility. If I know that we're going to go up and to the right, and we've seen growth year over year over year, and I can predict and I can anticipate growth, that's a lot different than, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if the virus is going to come back. I don't know if we're going to get a vaccine. I don't know if this trickle-down effect of the economy is going to affect my industry in certain ways. Instead of a straight line to the right, I might see some adversity and some peaks and troughs before we ultimately get to a certain environment through the recovery, right? So all my vendors, all my costs, I want to keep cost variability as it relates to demand that I need for those services. So when you look at HR leaders, mentioned some of this before. Now they're dealing with lack of budget. Maybe they've had to furlough and lay off employees. So now I'm dealing with lack of bandwidth, increased initiatives that I had mentioned on top of all this. And unfortunately, now I have less of a voice in the room. Before, it was a war for talent. My opinion was heard. If I asked for something to get that talent or to invest in that talent, I got it every single time. Now, not so much. We're just trying to stay alive with the team members that we have, right? So you look at the lack of predictability. We mentioned this before. Hiring volume, reactionary hiring needs hey, I wasn't busy the last 2 quarters because of the pandemic. I know I'm busy now. I don't know if I'm going to be busy in Q3, and I have no idea what Q1 looks like and how to operate in an environment like that. You're going to see a return of the contract temp to perm model. So staffing companies that are providing flexible labor services. Hey, I have a need for an IT professional for 3 months. I can't guarantee it's going to go beyond that, but I know I have a need right now. And the labor market is such that there's a plethora of talent out there that's willing to accept an opportunity like that, whereas before it wasn't. So you're going to see a lot more temp to perm, kind of flexible labor related relationships and partnerships with staffing companies. And you're going to see the candidate pool that ultimately wants a full-time permanent job ultimately realize that they need to get back to work, and they're going to see more of these opportunities, and you're going to see more of a shift towards this. You saw this in 08, 09, 2010, 11, and 12. Fee-based recruiting firms, the 20-25% fee-based firms that arguably made a lot of money over the last 8-9 years, they're going to be the last resort. I haven't talked to a customer that has had any sort of approval for that type of spending just for one person that there's no real guarantee that they're going to stay for a really, really long time. Leveraging technology to automate tasks. Hey, is there a technology out there that I can take 3 or 4 hours a week per person to automate times 10 people? Those are investments that are going to be made during this time. And then last but not least, finding partners that provide variability that's needed during uncertain times. PEO services, professional employment organizations, outsourced training. Instead of having in-house training, maybe I'll send my future leaders to a boot camp or hire executive coaches for folks that are in management. HR consultants to take on projects or to provide fractional ongoing support. I'm lean now. I know I need a little bit of support, but I'm not willing to invest, nor do I have the go-ahead to hire full-time talent on my HR team. Full service payroll. I'm just going to outsource the payroll function. And of course, recruiting process outsourcing, which we're going to get into here in a second. Before we do that, let's talk about the contingent staffing and recruiting model. So these firms operate on what's called a contingent basis, meaning that the customer does not have to pay for services rendered until they hire a successful placement, meaning a candidate from one of these recruiting companies. Sounds like a really, really, really good deal if you're a company. I don't have to pay anything up front. All the, I guess the burden and the risk is on the recruiting firm. And yeah, it's a high fee, but maybe I'm willing to pay that. Now, what you don't realize is that causes massive inefficiencies for a recruiting firm and the industry in general, which kind of gives the industry a bad rap in a lot of senses. There's high turnover for recruiters at recruiting and staffing companies. Customers are constantly complaining about, hey, am I getting dedicated support? Quality of service, the cost is too high. This model has been around for the last almost 100 years, dating back to the 30s and 40s. It's a brokerage model, very similar to real estate brokers that charge 2, 3, 4% on the front end of a transaction on your house, and then 2 to 3 or 4% on the back end of a transaction. These are massive fees. Let's look under the hood at a recruiting and staffing company, though. Say I'm the owner of a 30-person recruiting firm. Things happen. If I'm working on a position, or my recruiters are working on a position for a customer, that recruiter may work 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months on a position, and that customer might change their mind on what they're looking for. Hey, I thought I needed a senior person. Now I need a junior person. Let's switch gears. And now they're spending more time that's unmonetized. The company could just change their mind. Hey, I know you worked 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months in this position. We decided that we don't need this anymore. Or they filled the position internally through a referral that they had sitting in their pocket, and to avoid a fee, they hired that person versus the agency person. Or I'm going to call out a position to 2, 3, 4, 5 recruiting firms all at once and let them duke it out and fight for this placement. Why not? I don't have to put any skin in the game. on the front end. So if you look at it, there are massive inefficiencies. There are hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of time that go unmonetized. It's brutal for the recruiter in that environment. They're constantly, in a position where they might be doing good work, but for reasons outside of their control, they don't hit their goals, right? But more importantly, as a firm, 50 to 75% of a recruiting firm's time goes unmonetized because of the inefficiencies of the model. So these firms have to charge 20, 25, 30% really high bill rates on contract employees, not because they're doing like a 25% good job. It's basically the customers that end up paying aren't just paying for that person, they're paying for the entire inefficiencies of the entire model. That's why the industry charges so much. If you look at real estate brokerages, it's a brokerage model. I have to pay 3% on the front end and 3% on the back end. That's crazy. Those are really, really high fees. And I'm finding the house that I ended up living in on Redfin and Zillow. This is crazy. Most brokerage industries have been disrupted at this point by either technology or a change in the business model. And for some reason, the contingent recruiting and staffing space has not changed. RPO is a disruptive alternative to that. We'll get into the details here in a second, which is the purpose for this conversation. It's a disruptive model. It can leverage technology. It can give you that scalability and cost efficiencies that they're looking for. And we'll get into that in a second. But obviously, I'm very, very passionate about this subject, being in the industry for as long as I have. So RPO is defined as recruiting process outsourcing. It's a business model where a company outsources management of the recruiting function in whole or part, mostly part, to a third-party expert to drive cost, quality, efficiency, service, and scalability benefits. This shows up at companies large and small. Okay, so the Fortune 1000, think of a multinational company, a Motorola. There was a deal done in the 2000s where they had outsourced their entire recruitment function. They had no in-house recruiters outside of a couple to an RPO firm, which meant that there were hundreds at any given time over a 3 to 5 year contract period, on-site or off-site, doing the entire recruitment function for a company of that size. Now, why do they do that? There's scalability benefits. I need 100 recruiters this year. I might need 200 recruiters next year. I might only need 50 the year after that. To avoid layoffs and culture issues, I can just scale up and scale down my RPO firm. Cost advantages. So because we only specialize in recruitment and we've driven down the cost as low as possible to be a service provider in this industry, and the scalability benefits, Motorola is going to see a cost per hire, which is the main key performance indicator, benefit of going the RPO route versus a slow-moving investment in an internal HR infrastructure. Now, it's much different for small, medium-sized businesses, 100 plus employees, the mid-market, 100 to 5,000 employees. This may show up as fractional recruiting support. Hey, I'm a small HR team. I need maybe one dedicated recruiter or half a recruiter, 20 hours a week, dedicated to my team to give the bandwidth that I need. This could be sourcing only support. So, hey, I have a 5-person recruiting team. We're lean. They're slammed. They're all working on 20 positions each, but they don't have time to source. They don't have time to go after that passive job seeker and sit on LinkedIn and hunt, certain skill sets. So I need to outsource that function maybe to an RPO firm like Lucas James. I might outsource certain functions. We have a big IT department with very specialized needs. I need specialized IT recruiters to focus on that. And I'm an HR leader. My recruiters are going to focus on corporate roles, everything else. Or maybe I'm a big sales organization. I do a lot of sales hiring throughout the year, so on and so forth. Or maybe I have a big project that comes up every year, like an internship program that causes bandwidth issues because it's a one-time thing that you can't staff for, then maybe I'll just outsource that to a third-party firm. Some characteristics of an RPO model, essentially what it comes down to, I'll break it down for everybody. Instead of paying a high fee per placement, you're paying for the labor hours, either in an hourly rate kind of format or a retainer kind of format, and a modest profit on that labor hours, just like you're paying for any other service out there. If you have like lawn maintenance services or a plumber or a bookkeeping service or an accounting firm, attorneys, like everybody just charges based on the labor that's out there versus a high fee for an outcome that may or may not happen, right? So it's flipping of that mindset to say, okay, we're doing this in the recruiting function. The main driver of the cost is, instead of paying 25% for that $80,000 person, $20,000 fee, I'm going to engage an RPO firm to fill multiple positions. And everyone knows a recruiter can work on and fill multiple positions at once. That cost per hire is driven down dramatically from 20 to 25% in the alternative to somewhere between 4 and 12% per hire, which mirrors internal recruiting costs. Obviously, dramatic cost savings there, coupled with the flexibility to scale up and scale down based on hiring demand. So again, if you're busy in Q3, you weren't busy in Q2, you have demand now, but you don't have demand in Q4, you might have recruiters sitting on their hands internally. And then, God forbid, there's another lockdown. Now we're talking furloughs and layoff situations. That's what happened back in March, right? So, and then again, another characteristic of the RPO model, you're getting dedicated support. So if you have sales hiring needs, you get a specialized sales recruiter. If you have IT or software engineering hiring needs, you get a specialist recruiter dedicated to your business, just like they're an internal recruiter on your team. They just so happen to be a vendor partner to you. So what are the benefits of an RPO in a recessionary environment? I'm going to try to wrap this up pretty quick. So let's kind of summarize. So current state HR leaders have lack of bandwidth. They have more on their plate with less resources to do the jobs before. HR leaders have other critical initiatives on their plate, and they need that additional bandwidth, but they might not be able to get approval to hire on their team again. Hiring manager pressure. The technical manager is asking for certain people. The sales manager or CRO is asking for sales hiring. I can't get around to it. And I'm getting a lot of pressure from everybody within my organization to do a job that I had more resources to do before. CFO and procurement limiting use of the 20-25% fee-based firms that you had access to before, or adding overhead and headcount to your HR team now. Hey, I need the support, but I can't get approval to hire an additional recruiter because I might be in a situation where I might not have something for that person down the road. And of course, unpredictable hiring needs. So some use cases for this. Again, the bigger upper mid-market companies, the 1,000 to 500 employee companies, maybe before COVID, they had 50 recruiters. Now they have 25 recruiters. The demand is supportive of maybe 20, 25 recruiters. But if they grow from there, they're going to be in a tight spot and have to figure out a solution around that. So they start an RPO relationship with a dedicated recruiter to supplement. Maybe they start with 1 or 2 recruiters on the team. Get familiar with the hiring managers, get familiar with the process, knowing that you're going to scale up and scale down demand over time. And now you have a partner that you can scale up and scale down with month over month or quarter over quarter. Think of growth phase technology companies. So companies that are either on the fundraising cycle, they're getting Series A, Series B, Series C, massive investment of capital that they then have to go hire a bunch of people with, right? So maybe I have 2 recruiters. My company gets $20 million to go hire 50 more individuals. 2 recruiters can't handle that. Are you going to hire more full-time recruiters just for a short-term hiring ramp? Are you going to add, are you going to spend a lot of money on fees? You're not left with a lot of solutions. RPO is a very, 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 very good solution for that. And we have a lot of customers in the technology field at Lucas James Talent Partners. And then, of course, small businesses. I see a lot of small business attendees or small business support services that are supporting small businesses. A lot of small businesses don't have a recruiter. And if they did, they might have furloughed or laid off that recruiter. So as business activity picks back up, again, do I spend money on fees? Do I hire and bulk up that internal team? Again, knowing that there's going to be a period of uncertainty for 1 to 3 years, or do I find a flexible partner that can give me those cost benefits and the scalability benefits that I'm looking for? Okay, I'm going to open it up to Any questions from the attendees? So I don't see any questions. I had a couple come in over email that I'll just kind of rattle off and I'll finish out the presentation with. The first is, what is the cost comparison of recruiting process outsourcing to internal recruiting team members? So let's break that down for a second. I don't think, when you're an HR leader in a boom time scenario, you're looking at that cost as critically as you are before. But let's look what goes into that cost. Okay, you have the recruiter salary. So market rate would dictate somewhere between a base salary of $65,000 to $120,000. That's a wide range, but that's a base salary. Maybe a 10 to 20% bonus potential or some sort of variable comp associated with that. Taxes and unemployment insurance, FICA, FUTA, SUTA, somewhere between, let's say, 15% of that salary. You're looking at employee benefits. Employee benefits typically range between 15 to 30% of their salary, depending on how many luxury benefits that organization had before. You're looking at a manager's time, right? So I'm a manager of a recruiter. If I need to spend 5 hours managing that recruiter a week or 2 hours managing that recruiter a week, you need to add that cost in there. LinkedIn recruiter licensing, applicant tracking systems, job postings, like couple all those costs together and look at an RPO firm, the cost is very, 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 very similar. So because Lucas James Talent Partners specializes in this, we can dial those costs in, we can specialize recruiters, we can get lower cost, maybe sourcing resources behind a recruiter to drive that price point down, to give the most cost advantageous benefits to our clients. So from a cost standpoint, apples to apples, you could look at that. The second thing you could look at is cost per hire. So if there's any HR leaders looking at this, add up all the costs that I had mentioned for the entire team, and then divide by how many placements you're making per year. That's what your cost per hire is. And then take the average salary, and then you'll get what percentage of salary that is. Somewhere between 4 and 12% you're looking at. Recruiting process outsourcing is 4 to 12%. Again, 4% is more for the big volume players. Hey, you're making a commitment for 1,000 hires this year. We're going to get some consistencies. We can place people in droves versus I might have some specialized IT needs that are a lot harder at a higher salary point. So any other questions around that, please reach out to me. My email is tim@lucasjamestalent.com. The other question that came up, and I just polled some prospects and partners and some clients, is how does RPO contrast to just hiring a contract recruiter? So there's a lot of recruiters that are looking for a job right now that may take something that's short term. I think what you have to realize is that recruiter is probably not looking for a 3-month gig, right? They're actively searching for a permanent opportunity, especially in this environment. So a majority of their time is going to be spent making sure that if you put yourself in their shoes, you can't blame it. Looking for that full-time opportunity so they can take care of themselves and their family and get those benefits, as opposed to a shorter term indefinite contract, right? So you're going to be constantly worried about, I'm hiring someone from scratch. There's going to be some training and development time. And they might leave me at 1 minute or another. And I might worry about that because I might need that individual for a longer period of time. RPO, the recruiters are all full-time permanent staff benefits employees of my firm or any other RPO firm. And then the customer is really the one that has that flexibility to tap into those resources when they want to. And then what we'll do is that we'll just apply those recruiters to a different project. So, they're safe in their situation in their environment. They're working on different projects and different customers throughout the year. They're okay with that. That's part of our model. But the company doesn't really have to worry about doing a search, interviewing recruiters, worrying about retention issues. They can just pick up the phone and call Tim and say, "Hey, Tim, it's Friday. I need a dedicated resource on Monday. Can you allocate someone to us?" So that's essentially how it works. I know we're going a little bit over. I want to thank everybody for coming today. Again, if you're showing up to this, I think you're forward thinking about what does this recession mean for me? What does this mean for my company? What does this mean for my occupation as an HR leader or a service provider in a human capital space? Obviously, we're trying to get the word out about recruiting process outsourcing, the benefits now in other environments. I'd appreciate any referrals our way. Any additional questions, please reach out to us. You can find us at lucasjamestalent.com, www.lucasjamestalent.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Tim Shum, SCHUMM on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. And then feel free to send me an email if there's any follow-up questions, tim@lucasjamestalent.com. Everyone have a great rest of the day. We'll talk to everyone soon. Take care.